This biblically rooted text, this biblically rooted document, has, I suggest to you, long-range potential for bearing fruit. I think if we really took seriously this document, it would unleash boundless energy and potential for good in all members of the church. Archbishop Stafford, you know, for a number of years was the Archbishop of Denver, Colorado, before going to Rome. He told us a story last year when he came to visit in Halifax. He was talking to the young people, talking about the importance of young people getting involved in the church and contributing their time and their talent. He didn't mention the treasure. I guess he figured university students didn't have too much treasure. He said, you know, when I was in Denver, I arrived a couple of weeks early. I had a couple of Sundays before I was installed. And what he did on one of those Sundays is he went to the local Baptist church. They didn't know who he was, because his picture hadn't appeared in the paper or they didn't recognize him. But they knew that he was not a member of that church. They began to talk to him and ask him about himself, about his talents and his abilities. Before he left, he was signed up to serve on a couple of committees. Now he says that doesn't very often happen in our church. Our churches tend to be large, they tend to be impersonal, they tend to not have a sense of community, and maybe even if you have greeters or welcomers, the welcomers are really trying to get you to find a seat and move out of the hallway and not block the people exiting for the parking lots. And they don't really say, you know, welcome here and what can you contribute? What can you bring? How can you be part of our outreach? And I think, again, this is where focusing not just on treasure, which is an important feature of stewardship, but also on the contribution of time and talent to the community of faith is important. Again, I suspect and I suggest to you that if we were to take seriously this challenge that is found in the Bishop's pastoral letter, it would help our evangelization outreach to take a priority status, rather than being, I think in most of our congregations, just speaking now from my experience of the church, as kind of a secondary category, not the primary one. I also believe that if we truly embrace the principle of stewardship, help people to live it, I think there would be an abundance of what I would call the service vocations in the church. The people who give their whole lives to serving the church in the consecrated life and in the priesthood. Because I think when one has a stewardship mentality, a sharing mentality, there is that notion of families wanting their children to be givers, wanting their children to serve, and being delighted if they were called to do that. A couple of times when I've gone to university level fundraising research projects. I was the dean for a number of years here in Toronto, and the rector was trying to get fundraising going. We hadn't heard about stewardship, so we were just looking for money. We were told that there's going to be, in the next few years, the transfer of $1 trillion in capital that is handed on from one generation to the next. And the question is, to whom will this be given? I remember one couple who were approached in our diocese to make a contribution. They phoned up themselves and asked, is it possible for us to give a large sum of money to the church? Because they had already made plans to give it to the university, but they didn't know whether we could take a large sum of money and do anything with it. We said we would be happy to learn how to handle that. And that began to be the movement in our own diocese to look at gifts on a larger scale. This document is based on the notion of a conversion of one's personal outlook. One of the things that we're trying to do in our diocese in terms of encouraging vocations to the consecrated life and to the priesthood is to begin to encourage everyone to see himself or herself as called by God. That God has a specific plan for me. God has given me gifts and talents, and one of the most important things that I can do in husbanding that set of talents and gifts is to explore what I might be able to do for the kingdom, for God. Naturally, marriage is going to be the primary vocation for the largest number of our people. But I think that, of course, challenges us to say, what do we expect of couples in marriage? What kind of message are we giving about married life? I don't want to dwell on that today. We're talking really about the pastoral, but I think it's an important issue. Another factor that has come in is a number of people have told me that they feel that the church has walked away from involving them in its life by not really espousing and encouraging the vocation to the single life. Single life has seemed to be, well, just something that happens when you don't find another call. But others have discovered in searching for God's will for themselves that they are called to serve God as a single person. And even if that's something that the church is gradually and only latterly coming to see, it's important. Consecrated life, I think, as much as priesthood, perhaps even more than priesthood, is really in crisis in North America and the Western world generally. The consecrated life of the brotherhood, for example, I belong to the Jesuit order. We don't have any brothers. The brothers in the future will probably not exist. And I regret that because I believe that the brother is the true consecrated person. Jesuits are consecrated to religious life and to the vows, but I think most of us find our identity in the priesthood and what we do and how we carry on that priesthood. The priesthood, as you know, has also been slightly troubled, although there are more positive signs surfacing in these latter days. There was an article at the beginning of September saying that the seminaries now have much younger candidates entering for the first time in a long time. I welcome that. Maybe it's the fruit of the pastoral in the United States for these last 10 years. Even if people have a vocation to a particular state in life, the primary vocation, this document says, is to be a disciple, to be a learner, to be a follower. And I would suggest to you that one of the most important things in being a learner or follower is to be invited into intimacy with Jesus. There's a beautiful text in Mark chapter 3 where Jesus goes up on the mountain, spends the night in prayer, and comes down and calls 12 to be his apostles. He calls them, first of all, to be with him, and then to be sent out. I think that's important. That Jesus creates community. Jesus creates fellowship. Jesus himself wanted to have community life. Needed, if you want to say it in a certain way, needed to be with others. To be authentically human, he needed friends. In John chapters 14 to 17, Jesus speaks of his intimate fellowship and union with his friends, whom he no longer calls servants, but calls them friends. A servant doesn't know what's in the mind of the master. Simply carries out orders. But Jesus calls them friends because he wants them to be with him and to bear fruit, and to bear more abundant fruit, to do greater works even than he was able to do. And I think this is one of those things that challenges us to look at who I am, what I have, and what I'm about.